Let me tell you something that nobody wants to admit out loud. Right now, somewhere in your brain, there is a running scoreboard. It tracks what you have versus what other people have. It clocks how far along someone else is in their career compared to yours. It notices the car in the neighbor's driveway. It watches the follower count, the engagement, the wedding photos, the promotion announcement, the body, the house, the life. And here's the part that will make you uncomfortable. You didn't choose to run that scoreboard. It runs itself, automatically, constantly, without your permission. You are not weak for doing this. You are not broken. You are not insecure in some unique, shameful way that separates you from everyone else. You are, in the most literal sense of the word, human. And understanding exactly what that means is about to change the way you see yourself and every single person around you. To understand why we compare, you have to go back, not to your childhood, not to the moment someone first made you feel like you weren't enough. You have to go back about 200,000 years. Your ancestors lived in small tribal groups, typically between 50 and 150 people. In that world, your survival was not an individual project. It was a collective one. If you were kicked out of the group, you died. Simple as that. No shelter, no food, no protection from predators. Being part of the tribe wasn't a preference. It was life itself. So your brain evolved a hypersensitive system designed to track one critical question at all times. Where do I stand? Am I valuable enough to this group that they'll keep me? Am I pulling my weight? Am I contributing enough, strong enough, skilled enough, liked enough, that when things get hard, they choose to keep me and not leave me behind? That system is called social comparison, and it was brilliant, it was adaptive, it kept your ancestors alive. The problem is, you are no longer living in a tribe of 150 people on an open savanna. You are living in a world of 8 billion people, most of whom are broadcasting the absolute best, most curated, most highlight reel version of their lives directly into your eyeballs through a device you carry in your pocket. Your ancient brain has no framework for this. It cannot distinguish between your neighbor and a celebrity with 40 million followers. To your threat detection system, they are both people in your tribe, and both of them appear to be doing better than you. That's the trap. That's what we're dealing with. An evolutionary tool built for a world that no longer exists, running at full speed inside a world it was never designed for. In 1954, a social psychologist named Leon Festinger published what became one of the most referenced theories in all of psychology. He called it social comparison theory. And the central idea was this: human beings have a fundamental drive to evaluate their own opinions and abilities, and we do it primarily by measuring ourselves against other people. Festinger identified two directions this comparison travels. The first is upward comparison. That's when you look at someone who appears to have more, be more, or achieve more than you. More money, more success, more beauty, more status. And depending on your psychological state, this can either motivate you or destroy you. When you're in a healthy, grounded place, looking up at someone further along can spark ambition. You think, that's possible. I want that. I can work toward that. But when you're already fragile, when you're tired, when you're uncertain, when you're already doubting yourself, looking up doesn't motivate you. It shrinks you. It makes you feel like the gap is permanent, like they have something you will never have. Like the distance between where you are and where they are is not a matter of time or effort, but of fundamental worth. The second is downward comparison. That's when you look at someone who appears to be doing worse than you. And here's where it gets psychologically interesting, because most people assume this is harmless. It's not. When you build your sense of self-worth on the foundation of at least I'm not like them, you are doing something quietly dangerous. You are outsourcing your self-esteem to someone else's misfortune. You are making your confidence dependent on finding people below you on some invisible hierarchy. And what happens when that person improves? What happens when you lose access to that benchmark? You collapse. Because you never actually built anything. You just borrowed stability from someone else's instability. Now, here is where neuroscience enters the picture. And this part is genuinely fascinating. When you compare yourself to someone and perceive that you are doing better, your brain releases dopamine, the same chemical that fires when you eat sugar, when you get a text message, when you win something. Your brain rewards you for coming out ahead in a comparison. That reward teaches your brain to keep comparing, because comparison sometimes feels good. That is not a moral failure. That is operant conditioning. Your brain is doing exactly what it was wired to do. But the inverse is also true. When you compare yourself to someone and perceive that you are doing worse, your brain increases cortisol, the primary stress hormone. Your nervous system reads that moment as a threat, as danger, as potential rejection from the tribe, and it responds accordingly. Heart rate up, focus narrowing, mood dropping, anxiety rising. This is why scrolling through social media can leave you feeling inexplicably bad. You haven't done anything. Nobody has attacked you, but your nervous system has just registered 50 small threats in the form of people who appear to be ahead of you, and it has been flooding your body with low-grade stress hormones for the entire duration of that scroll. You're not anxious for no reason. Your brain is responding rationally to the environment you've placed it in. Here's where I want to get specific, because not everyone who compares themselves to others does it the same way. Over decades of psychological research, and honestly, over years of just watching how people behave, certain patterns emerge, certain types of comparers. And when you see yourself in one of these, don't flinch away from it. That recognition is the beginning of everything. The first type is what I call the chronic comparer. This is the person for whom comparison is not an occasional response to a trigger. It is a constant background hum. They walk into a room and immediately, unconsciously, start ranking everyone. They hear a friend got a raise and their stomach drops before they've even finished processing the sentence. They cannot enjoy their own achievements because within seconds of reaching a goal, they have already found someone who reached the same goal faster, bigger, younger. The chronic comparer is exhausting to be because there is no finish line. No achievement is ever purely theirs. Every win comes preloaded with the question, but is it enough compared to? What's underneath this? Almost always, it's a childhood environment where love, attention, or approval was conditional and comparative. Parents who said things like, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" Or, "Look how well she's doing in school." Teachers who ranked students publicly. Early environments where worth was not assumed, but earned through relative performance. The child in that environment learns, I am only valuable if I am more valuable than someone else. And they carry that algorithm into adulthood without ever questioning whether it was true to begin with. The second type is the performing comparer. This one is subtle and socially dangerous. They don't just compare privately, they perform the comparison outwardly. They are the person who casually mentions their salary in a group conversation, who drops their accomplishments into unrelated discussions, who brings up where they went to school, who they know, what they own, not because it's relevant, but because the mention itself is the point. They are trying to win a game that they started in a room full of people who didn't know they were playing. What's underneath this? Usually a profound terror of being seen as ordinary. These are people who, somewhere along the line, decided that being average was the same as being invisible, that ordinary meant unloved. So they are in constant broadcast mode, constantly transmitting signals of status and achievement, because silence feels like disappearing. The third type is the resentful comparer. This is the type that causes the most damage, to themselves and to others, because their comparison has curdled into something darker. They look at someone else's success and they don't feel motivated. They don't even feel sad. They feel angry. They feel like that person's win is somehow their loss. Like success is a finite resource, and the fact that someone else has it means there's less of it available for them. This is the person who subtly undermines others, who finds reasons why the successful person doesn't deserve it, who is quick to point out the flaws in someone else's achievement. Well, she only got that because of who her father knows, as a way of reducing the gap. If I can't pull myself up, I'll pull them down. At least then the scoreboard looks better. What's underneath this? Profound hopelessness about their own potential. The resentful comparer has, at some deep level, given up on their own path. They no longer believe their efforts will produce outcomes. So rather than compete, which requires hope, they diminish. It's a coping strategy, not a character flaw. But it is one that will slowly poison every relationship and every opportunity they touch. The fourth type is the secret comparer. This one is the most common and the least talked about, because they do all of this internally and appear, on the surface, to be completely unbothered. They smile when you get the promotion. They hug you at the engagement party. They double-tap the Instagram post. But internally, in the private running monologue that never stops, they are taking notes. They are measuring. And then they go home and lie awake at 2 a.m. wondering what's wrong with them. What's underneath this? Usually a combination of genuine care for others. They do love the people they're comparing themselves to, and a crushing inability to separate someone else's success from their own perceived failure. They have fused these two things together in a way that feels logically true. If she succeeded, it means I haven't. But that is not logic. That is a cognitive distortion. And it is running their life without their awareness. Everything I've described so far has existed for as long as humans have. But something happened in the last 15 years that changed the scale of this problem in ways we are still struggling to fully comprehend. Social media didn't create comparison. It poured jet fuel on it. Before the internet, your comparison pool was limited by geography. You compared yourself to people in your neighborhood, your workplace, your school. You had maybe a few hundred people whose lives you could meaningfully observe. And crucially, you observed them in full. You saw them on bad days. You saw the messy house and the difficult marriage and the financial stress and the bad haircuts and the ordinary Tuesday afternoons. Your comparison was built on something approaching a complete picture. Now, your comparison pool is effectively infinite, and you are not seeing complete pictures. You are seeing the single most flattering frame of a person's entire week, professionally lit, filtered, captioned, and posted at the exact moment of peak performance. You are comparing your unedited, unfiltered, messy, complicated internal experience to someone else's external highlight reel. And your brain cannot automatically correct for this. Your brain sees an image of someone on a beach in Santorini, and it does not automatically add the footnote. This person has debt. This person had 3 anxiety attacks last month. This person spent 4 hours getting this photo and deleted the other 47. It just sees person on a beach in Santorini, not you. And the stress hormone cycle begins. There's a study that came out of the University of Pennsylvania. Researchers had students limit their social media use to 30 minutes per day for 3 weeks. At the end of those 3 weeks, those students reported significantly lower levels of loneliness and depression compared to the control group who used social media normally. Not slightly lower, significantly lower. That is not a coincidence. That is the direct, measurable psychological cost of exposing your ancient comparison brain to a curated parade of apparent achievement and beauty and success for hours every day. And here's the part that should concern you deeply. The platforms know this. The engineers and product designers at these companies understand the dopamine-cortisol loop better than most psychologists. They have deliberately engineered features to maximize the time you spend in that loop. Because your attention, your emotional response, your engagement, even when that engagement is anxiety and envy, is the product. You are not the customer. You are the inventory. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is documented, public, on-record information. Former employees of these platforms have testified to it. The documents have been leaked. The business model is transparent once you understand it. You are operating inside a machine that was designed to make you feel like you're falling behind. Let's talk about what chronic comparison actually costs you. Not philosophically, practically, in your real daily life. It costs you your presence. When you are constantly measuring your life against someone else's, you are never fully in your life. You are always looking sideways. You are at dinner with people who love you, and part of your brain is tracking someone else's vacation in real time. You are in the middle of building something genuinely meaningful, and you keep pausing to check how it measures up. The ability to be here, fully, without the running comparison in the background. That is the ability to actually experience your life. And comparison steals it. It costs you your creativity. This one is brutal, and almost nobody talks about it. Comparison is the single most efficient killer of original thought. When you are constantly measuring your work against someone else's, you stop creating from the inside and start creating from the outside. You stop making what only you can make and start trying to make what they made, but slightly better. You lose your specific, unrepeatable voice, the one that was never going to look like theirs anyway, and replace it with an imitation that is always going to come second because it's always going to be a copy. Every great creator, every original thinker, every person who has ever made something that mattered had to go through a period of ignoring the comparison, had to trust the thing inside them that had nothing to do with what anyone else was doing. That is not comfortable. It feels reckless, but it is the only way anything real ever gets made. It costs you your relationships. This one is quiet and cumulative, but it is devastating. When you compare yourself to the people you love, you start to resent them for your own suffering. You love your friend, genuinely, but you also cannot fully celebrate her success because it triggers you. So you smile with your face and contract inside. Over time, that contraction builds walls. You become someone who can't fully show up for the people who matter to you because their happiness has become entangled with your sense of inadequacy. And you can feel yourself becoming that person, the one who flinches at good news, and you hate yourself for it, which makes it worse. It costs you your relationship with your own achievements. This is perhaps the cruelest tax. You work hard. You achieve something real, and you get approximately 30 seconds to feel good about it before your brain locates the person who achieved the same thing earlier, or bigger,
or with less effort, and the joy evaporates. Not slowly, instantly, like a light switch. People who live inside chronic comparison almost never experience genuine, sustained satisfaction from their own work. The goalpost always moves because the goalpost was never really about the goal. It was about the gap.
Now, here is where most videos like this would give you a list of tips. 5 habits to stop comparing yourself to others. 3 morning routines. A journaling prompt. And I'm not going to do that. Not because those things are useless, but because they treat the symptom while leaving the disease untouched. The disease is the belief, running somewhere deep in the operating system, that your worth is relative, that it is determined by where you fall on some hierarchy relative to other people, that you are valuable because you are above someone or despite being below someone. That worth is something you earn, maintain, and can lose. That belief is a lie. It is a useful lie. It drove your ancestors to compete and perform and secure their position in the tribe. But it is still a lie. Your worth is not relative. It is not comparative. It is not earned or revoked based on what someone else achieves. This is not a feel-good platitude. This is an ontological statement about the nature of a human life. You did not come into the world in competition with anyone. Your existence is not contingent on outperforming a peer cohort. Now, and this is important, knowing that intellectually and feeling it are 2 completely different things. You can read that paragraph and nod along and go right back to feeling gutted when a former classmate posts a milestone. Because the belief is not stored in the part of your brain that processes language and logic. It is stored in the part that runs on pattern recognition and emotion and memory. You can't think your way out of it. You have to work your way out of it, slowly, consistently, over time. So what does that actually look like? It looks like catching the comparison in motion, not judging yourself for it. Judgment just adds shame to the pile, and shame is not a catalyst for change. But catching it, naming it. I am comparing myself to this person right now. My nervous system is registering this as a threat. That brief act of metacognition, of watching your own mind, creates just enough distance between the trigger and the reaction for you to make a different choice. It looks like asking yourself what the comparison is actually telling you, because underneath every painful comparison is a piece of information about what you actually want. If you feel gutted every time you see someone else's creative work, that's not about them. That's about your own suppressed desire to create. If you feel a hollow ache every time someone gets the relationship you want, that's information about what you value. The comparison is a symptom. The desire is the signal. Chase the signal. It looks like ruthlessly curating your inputs. Not because you're fragile, not because you can't handle reality, but because you are a biological organism who is profoundly shaped by your environment, and you have the right to engineer that environment in your favor. Unfollow accounts that consistently make you feel worse about your life. Not with resentment, just with intention. Your attention is finite. What you feed it matters. It looks like investing in depth rather than breadth in your relationships. The antidote to comparison is intimacy. When you actually know someone, when you see their struggles and their fears and the ways they fall apart and doubt themselves, you cannot sustain the illusion that their life is simply better than yours. The illusion of someone else's perfect life requires distance. Closeness dissolves it. Invest in closeness. And it looks like building what psychologists call intrinsic motivation. An internal system for measuring your own progress that doesn't require anyone else as a reference point. Your own benchmark. Your yesterday versus your today. The question: am I moving in the direction that matters to me? Not, am I ahead of them? Not, am I better than where they were at my age? Am I closer to who I want to be than I was last week? That's the only comparison that builds something real. I want to end with something I think gets missed in almost every conversation about this topic. The people you compare yourself to are comparing themselves to other people too. The person whose career makes you feel behind has a person whose career makes them feel behind. The person whose body you envy is lying awake at night wishing they looked like someone else. The person who appears to have the perfect relationship is privately wondering whether the person they love actually sees them. We are all, at some level, running this same program. We are all carrying some version of this same wound. This is not a reason to dismiss your struggle. It is a reason to extend to yourself the same understanding you would extend to anyone else if you knew the full story. If your best friend told you they spent a night feeling worthless because someone posted a photo that made them feel behind, you would not lecture them. You would not tell them to just stop comparing. You would feel for them. You would see the pain underneath the thought. You deserve that same compassion, not as a reward for overcoming this, not as something you earn by fixing yourself. Right now, as a person in the middle of an ancient, deeply human struggle, doing your best with a brain that was built for a world that no longer exists. The comparison is not your character. It is a habit of mind built from years of conditioning, running in an environment specifically designed to exploit it. And habits of mind can change. Not overnight, not through willpower alone, but through understanding, the kind we've been doing here, and through the slow, patient, daily practice of choosing to measure yourself against yourself. There is a version of your life where your sense of self is not dependent on anyone else's timeline or achievement or appearance, where you can genuinely celebrate someone else's win because you are not keeping score. Where you can look at your own life and see it clearly, not through the distorting lens of everyone else's highlight reel, and find it worth living. That version of your life is not a fantasy. It is a practice, and it starts the moment you decide that who you are is not defined by where you rank.